Hello, sweet friends, and welcome back to the Quilters Candy Shop, where you will find sweet treats for the discerning quilter. One of my favorite things about spring and summer is shopping the open-air farmers markets. I always go home with a bag full of goodies. So today, we are going to turn this cute fabric panel into a simple yet adorable tote bag, perfect for all of your farmers market shopping adventures. You absolutely do not need a pattern for this project. Just follow along with our easy step-by-step instructions right here on YouTube to create your own fresh market tote bag. We are going to be using this Happy at Home designer panel by Tara Reed for Riley Blake Designs. And as usual, we have a few of these panels available in our shop, as well as a fresh market tote bag kit that includes everything you need to make 4 fresh market totes. You can find all of the fabric and the notions we use here in the shop at www.thequilterscandyshop.com. That's SHOPPE shop.com. All right, let's get started. The first thing we have to do is cut our squares to the size we want for our tote. I say the bigger the better. So we're going to use the full size of the panels to give us a super usable tote for any occasion. This panel has 4 18-inch designer blocks. You can use all 4 of them to make one tote bag if you didn't want to buy any additional fabrics. Just use 1 square for the front, 1 square for the back, and the other 2 for the lining. Or by adding some lining, you can make 2 tote bags using the panels on the outside and your coordinating print on the inside. Or if you have a few friends that shop the markets with you, use 1 panel for the front and add a lovely floral for the back and your coordinating print for the lining. And you will have 4 friendship bags to take on the road. Whether you make 1 bag or all 4 friendship bags, you will need to add another coordinating print for the strap. The details for the yardage are in the description below. Now, these are going to be soft, slouchy market bags, so we're not going to worry too much about precision. This is meant to be a fast and easy project that will fold up and tuck away in a purse, in a pocket, or even in the glove compartment, so they're always at the ready. This is a get it done and go on to the fun type of project. The panel is 1 yard long and 42 inches wide, and we're going to start by layering our lining and backing fabrics together with the panel so we can cut them all at once. To keep the fabrics from shifting on me, I'm going to throw in a few pins to hold everything flat. I put some around the edges where I'm going to cut, and then just a couple in the middle. This will also allow me to rotate the stack of fabric without messing up the layers. I'm going to start by cutting off these extra blocks off the end. And I'm just going to follow the line of the panel. And here's those extra pieces. I'm just going to set these aside for now. We're going to come back to these later. And now I can safely cut down the middle both directions to separate the blocks. Lastly, I'm going to trim up these outside edges by just cutting off the raw edges and the selvage and tidying up these ends. And now for each panel, I have my front panel, my backing piece, and my 2 pieces of lining. And they're all cut exactly the same, which is going to make it super easy to put this together. I'm going to finish trimming up the rest of my panels, and I'll be right back. I wanted to point out a mistake I made earlier. When you are layering your fabrics to cut out your panels, make sure you put your backing fabric face down, because you have to have this face up in order to cut on the line. So this one face down, and then your two lining fabrics, make sure they're facing each other. So when you're cutting them out, they're going to be exactly the same, and then you can just stitch right on the edge. Now let's take a look at these cute extra squares from the end of the panel. All four of them are slightly different sizes, but they all are easily squared up to 7 inches. The bottom edge is already cut from when we separated it from the big blocks. Next is to cut off the selvage by cutting along the top printed line all the way across. Starting on this end, there is no line, so I'm just going to quick take out these pins, line up the 7-inch on this bottom edge, and make just a line for me to cut on right here. Like that. And replace the pins. And so like before, I'm just going to follow the print line up and across the panel. Next, we're just going to cut apart on the lines the blocks. Now this nest block and this flower block both measure at 7 inches square. This let's stay at home piece is a little wide, so it needs to be centered and cut to 7 inches. It's 7 from top to bottom, and if you put the side of the S at 6.5, that will make a 7-inch block. So there's one side. Carefully turn this because you've got all the pins out, and line it up. And there's the other side. Just going to put a couple pins back in here just for safety. And now this one is also 7 inches. This one is double wide. It's actually 14 inches. So if you wanted to make a double pocket in one of your tote bags, you could cut this to 14 inches, which is what I think I'm going to do. I'm just going to cut on the line. I'm not going to even measure it. Depending on how many bags you're making, depends on how many pocket squares you need to prep. But here's how to do it. The next step is to add interfacing to our pocket. If you're going to do the double wide pocket, you will need a piece that is 13 3/4 by 6 3/4. Or cut one 6 3/4 inch square for each of the smaller pockets you will use. So for a little stability, we are going to put the shape flex on the back of the front of the pocket. So this is going to be the part of the pocket that shows. And so I'm going to put my shape flex on there. And you see here, this is why we made the square just a little bit smaller, so it'll fit on here and you won't get interfacing fusible on your ironing board or your iron. And just follow the instructions for fusing that on. And then to make the pocket, we're going to match up the edges as best as possible, right sides together. And we're going to sew all the way around, leaving a small opening right here. About, I like to make like a good 4-inch opening. Back stitch at the beginning and end and go all the way around the pocket. Once you have the pocket sewn, I like to do a little trimming to make it nice and neat. I'm just going to go down to about a scant 1/4 inch or a fat 1/8 of an inch. And don't forget to trim the corners so you get a nice turn when you go to turn these. And then turn these right side out. That's why I like a good 4-inch opening, because I can get my fat little fingers in there and get it really turned good and get these corners poked out. Be careful so you don't, whatever you're using for a turning tool, you don't poke through your seam allowance. So you got to be careful. All right, and then you're going to press it. Roll that seam so you get it all the way out and flat, and give it a press. Okay, and then when it comes to the opening, you're going to want to get that opening seam allowance tucked under there and get that pressed as well. And we're just going to leave that for now. But there we go. There is our pocket. Once you have your pockets prepped for your bag, it's time to place them on your lining. This is about 4 inches from the top, and this is about center. And that's it. I don't really worry about measuring it all out because it's inside the bag. No one's going to see it. And when you're using it, it doesn't really matter. So as long as you have it mostly visibly straight, you're good to go. This is a no fuss bag. All right, so we're going to throw a couple of pins in here to hold that in place. And then we're going to take it to the sewing machine, backstitch at the beginning, come down right along the edge and across the bottom where you're going to catch those seams and close up the opening at the bottom of the bag, and then come back up to the top and backstitch. To get the pockets to line up on both sides, I layer the other pocket on top of the first one, right sides together, like that. Put your square on here, like so, and then take a pin and just separate with your fingers. That one. And that. And now it's secure, and I can just add a couple more pins. If this was just the small square, I would just leave those two, but since this is the wider square, I want to stick a pin on each one of these ends, like that. Okay, now to the machine to sew up these pockets. All right, I've got this pocket sewn on, and look how cute that is, and plenty of space to put whatever you need in there. And here's the long pocket. Now I've turned this around because I'm going to be sewing this from the bottom up. What I've done is put pins in here where I'm going to make my multiple pockets. Now you can just sew one, or you can sew a couple evenly. I have 4 pockets here. I've got one that's just the right size for my cell phone. I made one that's 1.5 inches that I will be able to keep a pen, because I'm always searching for a pen at the bottom of my bag. And I've got this one here, which is a little bit bigger, and it's big enough to hold my big wad of keys. And then I have another one if I want to stick a wallet or credit cards or something in there. So I just marked these as how they're going to be useful for me. You can mark them how they will be useful for you. And for sure, you could use just an erasable marker with a ruler to mark those, but I'm just going to use pins because I want to get this fast done and on to the next step. And here's my finished double wide pocket. And you can see my stitching lines here, and I think it looks great. Now, once you're satisfied with where your perfect little pockets are placed, you can put your lining pieces right sides together and sew them together. You're going to leave this top edge open, and you're going to sew backstitch here, sew all the way around, and backstitch here. Now, before we can sew our panels together, we have to add the interfacing. Before we go on to the next step, I want to show you the difference between making the bag with interfacing and making it without. You can see that this is a much softer hand, but with the lining, it's got plenty of stability and strength to hold whatever you need. However, if you want a little bit more finished look, something that's a little stiffer and a little more store-bought finish, Then adding the interfacing on the back of the panel, front and back, will give you this more solid look compared to this more slouchy bag. So regardless if you use the interfacing on the panel, I do recommend the interfacing in the pocket because that's going to get a lot of wear and tear on it. And I do recommend the interfacing for the straps, and we'll come back to that in a minute. So we're going to turn this to the wrong side and get our 17.5-inch square to go on the back of our panels. The bumpy side is the fusible side, so the bumpy side down. Don't want to make that mistake. So I'm going to take these and fuse them, and then I'm going to sew them right sides together, just like the lining. When we cut out these parts, they were layered, if you recall, and so we cut them exactly the same size. So when I go to sew these together, I use about a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on here. I feel like a 1/4 inch is just not strong enough, or there's not enough meat there. So I use a 3/8 inch seam allowance on the panel on the outside of the bag. And then I use about a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the lining of the bag. This will make the lining just a little bit smaller, which means when it goes down inside, it's going to fit very nicely. So our next step is to press the seam allowances. I want to press these seam allowances open, and it's a little cumbersome to do it the normal way. So I like to start by splitting this open and then using my iron to press that one seam allowance up and out of the way. And I'll do this all the way around the bag. Don't forget to trim your corners, and this will make this much easier when these seam allowances flip up. They won't be layered on top of each other. They make a nice little mitered corner like that. Now this doesn't have to be pressed perfectly. We're just getting that seam allowance out of the way. Okay, and there it is. Now, once I have that one pressed up, it makes it a lot easier when you go to press these like this. You can see it's already, now it wants to split open right here. And fold that pocket back. And it helps it to want to be open now so I can press like this. Otherwise, you're fighting it. So just taking that one little step in addition to start makes it so much easier to press this seam open like that. And I'll flip it over. Press it open. You might have to give this a little tug in this center to make sure it's nice and flat. Again, if it's not, don't worry about it. It's on the inside of the bag. Nobody's going to see it. You won't even know because you're going to have your stuff all in it. Okay. Now, while you have it folded like this, also press in the halfway mark on your bag because we're going to use those to line up our lining and our outside. And so press those in nice and sharp. And then you're going to do the same thing with your outside of your bag. Split this open. So press it. I forgot to trim my corners on this one, so I'm going to do that now. Don't get too close to the stitching. Give yourself a few threads there so that it doesn't come apart. So there's my corner, just like that. Okay, now I'll go on to the pressing. So get this bottom edge up, this side edge open, and I'll just continue around the rest of the bag until we get to the next step. So to get this to do this, you just fold it in half like this and push it down, and this is going to be bunchy, and then if you fold this, you get this nice diamond shape in the center, and that makes it really easy to press it. So just bring it all the way to the point, and I can press this open. And again, it doesn't have to be perfect, we're just getting it done. See, it really helps to have that already pressed one direction. And we're going to leave our bags just like this while we go on to the straps. And finally, we're going to make the shoulder strap for this bag. We're going to use a little different technique than we've done in the past, but I think you'll like it. We're going to start by cutting a 4-inch strip of the coordinating fabric you want for the strap. Open it up and press it flat. Then fold it in half lengthwise, right sides together, and press in the center seam. Now, while it's folded in half, we are going to add a 1 3/4 inch wide strip of lightweight fusible interfacing down the center of one side of this strip that's folded in half, and fuse it into place. Now, if your interfacing that you're cutting isn't wide enough to do the whole 42 to 45 inches wide, you can just piece on another piece. It won't matter. I'm just going to trim this one up to fit. Line it up. Just a very slight overlap is all you need, not too much. And press it into place. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew down the long side of the strip. One really important tip, I would definitely use some pins or wonder clips to hold this in place in just a few places. This tends to twist, and so just trust me, throw in a few pins along the way here. And sewing with the interfacing side up and the fabric only side down towards the feed dogs to keep the fabric from shifting. Once you have your strap stitched, give it a pressing. You'll want to roll this seam allowance edge so you make sure it's all the way out so your strap is nice and flat. Just like that. Next, we're going to top stitch down the strap. I like to do 1/4 of an inch from the edge on both sides, and then come back and do a second row 1/4 of an inch away, so it'd be a 1/2 inch from the edge, and then do a 5th stitching line right down the center. This is going to keep your interfacing from releasing over time and bunching up inside the strap and causing your strap to stretch or twist or get distorted. Okay, and I just want to show you how great this looks with that stitching on it. It looks so professional and finished, and I just love the way it looks. And then no matter what happens to this thing, it's always going to stay nice and flat, and it's never going to stretch out of shape. All right, so now that our strap is done, we need to bring our bag parts over. And the first thing we got to do is turn the outside of our bag right side out and just flip it around. You want to make sure you get these points nice and poked out, because once we sew the lining in, this is the only time you're going to get to poke these out. So get those poked out nice and neat. I'm going to stick my scissors in there. Don't use your scissors. I always use my scissors. And there we go. I think that looks good. Okay. And let's make it nice and flat. And then we're going to do just like we did before. We're going to turn it like this. Now, that doesn't have to be so perfect there. We just need these. We just need this side seam, because we're going to take our strap and lay it right on the side seam. So you've got this center line stitching is going to line up with the seam line, and you're going to match up the raw edge of the strap and the bag and pin that into place. I like to use 2 pins so that way the strap doesn't shift on you. If you only use 1 pin in the center, it can pivot and shift. So 2 pins, it will stay in place. Okay, pick up the bag and then bring the strap around like this, because you want to make sure that that strap doesn't get twisted. So now that that's right, we're going to bring this to here, line up the center stitching with the seam, just like that. Make the raw edges flat and pin it. Perfect. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and you're just going to stitch along here. You might go across and back and come back and do it at 1/4 of an inch. Okay, so we want to really secure that right there. Do both sides and we'll come right back. Okay, there it is. So that's nice and secure. And now it's going to start looking like a bag, because we're going to take and put the outside of the bag inside the lining, just like that. And we're going to line up and secure the top edge. We're going to start by matching up the lining seam with the center stitch line on the strap and the side seam of the outer bag. And in this case, I'm going to use some Wonder Clips because they're fast and easy. Then flip it around. And do the same thing here. And then remember when we pressed in this little pressing line right here on both pieces, you're going to line that up now. And put a little Wonder Clip and do the other side too. So match up the fold. And you just have to manipulate the bag a little bit to get these edges to line up. Once you have those things pinned, then just stick your thumbs in and give it a nice tug and make sure everything's kind of evening out. And if you have to change a few clips, that's fine. Now you need to leave a 4-inch opening, and I like to do it on the back side. So that's the side with the backing fabric. That's going to be my opening. And then in the other parts, I'm just going to stick one clip in here to hold this all lined up. Now remember, we sewed the seam allowances to make this outer bag a little bit bigger than the lining, so it may not match up exactly flat all the way around, but if you spread it out, it'll be fine. And then when you're sewing it on the machine, put this side down to the feed dogs, and then the feed dogs will ease that in as we're going along. So I'm going to start right here. I'm going to sew all the way around with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Don't forget to do a little back stitch at the front and at the end, because you're going to have a little pressure on here when you turn the bag. All right, let's go get that done. Once you have your stitching done around the top of the bag, it is time to turn it right side out. So just reach in there, and I just grab the actual bag and pull the outside of the bag out. Just like that. Pull those straps out, that'll help. And then you eventually turn the lining right side out. You've got your bag. So your bag should look like this. The handles are on the outside here. And then we're going to pick that up and just tuck the lining down inside the bag. Now reach in there and push the lining corners into the bag corners. You want those nice and poked in there so they match up beautifully. And you can feel it. Poke that out and poke it right into those corners. And that will make your bag lie nice and flat. Look at that. We're almost done. It's looking good. All we have to do now is tuck this seam allowance. It's from the opening. Tuck this in here and give it a press. And press the whole top of the bag. So make sure that lining fabric is rolled all the way back so it doesn't poke out at the top. So you can see that there. And all the way around. And I'm going to give this a press. All right, and once that's pressed, the last step is to stitch about 1/4 of an inch top stitch all the way around the bag, and you're going to go across the back side of the handles at the 1/4 inch. And because we have this 1/2 inch seam allowance, it's going to make everything nice and secure and keep a very finished top edge. The lining's not going to poke out, and we're going to close up this opening. So let's get that and we'll be done. And there it is, all finished with the nice top stitch at the top. And look at our cute pockets on the inside. And look at this. This is so cute. How about that? A little bag with that cute little pocket in there. And how handy these are going to be. They can be worn as a shoulder bag for shopping, a crossbody bag for hiking or sightseeing. Your friends and family are going to love it. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed making yourself a fresh market tote bag. If you had a good time, please like and subscribe. And if you would be so kind as to drop a cute little comment in the comment sections to help us with the YouTube algorithm, we would greatly appreciate it. Now, go sew something sweet. Bye!